Well, keeping torture alive. A bill in the Senate is calling for a return to Bush-era torture. A freshman lawmaker introduced the amendment, which would undo President Obama's executive order banning torture as an interrogation technique. That amendment also aims to bring back a, quote, classified set of torture tactics. So this would deem certain forms of torture as allowed, but the public isn't allowed to know what they are. So why is Congress so gung-ho about torturing tactics? Former Reagan administration official and columnist Paul Craig Roberts joins us now. Welcome, Paul. Why are we seeing this renewed push for harsh interrogation practices?
Well, if you're talking about the detainee policy that's in the Defense Authorization Bill, which allows the U.S. military to pick up people in every country of the world, which includes China and Russia and the United States, and hold them indefinitely, then we're talking about something that's far greater than a torture policy. We're talking about the repeal of the United States Constitution. And what we see from the vote against the amendment by Rand Paul, the Republican senator from Kentucky, to exempt American citizens from this amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill that would allow the military to simply pick up any American citizen anywhere on earth and hold them indefinitely without charges. What we see is that Rand Paul's amendment got voted down by the U.S. Senate. So we have the U.S. Senate consisting of all except 2 Republicans plus 15 Democrats voting to repeal the United States Constitution.
Good day, everyone. Good evening. Hello. This is GGNonline.com. That's GGNonline.com. Also, DDarko2012 is my YouTube channel. There's a poll up here if you'd like to check it out. How would you react to an attack, invasion by a foreign nation? Let's say Iran and China. So far, 47 people have voted, and there are 3 days left to vote. The majority of people, 59%, are saying that they would join a non-governmental militia to fight the, quote, attacker, followed by 34% voters saying they would refuse to join and fight on religious, philosophical grounds. All right, so besides that, you have the email address here. You can put in there to get GGN updates. And on Global Government News Facebook, you can check that link out in YouTube's video description. So the first article I have up, besides that video with Paul Craig Roberts talking about indefinite detention and the amendment that Rand Paul, that's what I covered on Wednesday, was trying to introduce. And no, they said no. U.S. citizens will be included in this, and you can be rounded up. So that is basically the, repealing whatever constitutional right that you had to not be grabbed or abducted from your home without some kind of cause or being charged with anything, and then to basically not have any court or hearing or anything, just throw you away. So here we go. Senate okays $662 billion defense bill despite veto threat. Why don't they just make it 666, I mean, what's an extra $2 billion when you're wasting $13 trillion on the banks, right? It says here Congress and the White House are headed for a showdown, right? It's more of a show. It's a big theatrical show for the people, for the citizens, over a massive defense bill that would require the military to hold suspect or suspected terrorists linked to Al-Qaeda or its affiliates, even though that basically is saying those who are entrapped by the federal government, who are patriots, or maybe they're Muslim and they haven't actually done anything, committed a crime, or been charged in a court, they could just be hauled off. Even those who captured on U.S. soil and detained some indefinitely without a trial. Moving on here, Ron Paul and the Tea Party can't save you. 2012 National Defense Act is terrifying. It goes on here and it says that this act included a last-minute, quote, waiver to protect American citizens from the bill's more outrageous and fascist elements, including the right of the U.S. government to detain citizens, even those on American soil, indefinitely in military prison, i.e. FEMA camps. Remember, FEMA camps, de facto FEMA camps right now are in place. So whether people want to call me, you, or any of us that are trying to get this information out as conspiracy theorists, tell them to get their heads out of their asses, because there's actually a bill that was written that converts military bases, especially outdated ones, into these detention facilities. And the official terminology, or the word for the bill, is National Emergency Centers Act, or HR 645. This was in 2009. I remember posting this up at the little lunch room at the store that I was working at, and people just kind of thought I was crazy. So, I mean, and this is the crazy part, is that those that know about this are most likely to be put into these things. That's why they're the most concerned, whereas the sheeple who are not concerned or aware of any of this will probably just go in and out, or they'll go in there and they'll like it. They'll have all kinds of great stuff to get them in there, and they won't want to leave, really. Moving up next, we have Occupied America. Senate Bill 1867 would allow U.S. military to detain and murder anti-government protesters in American cities. That's right. Go in there and check that out. Just a bunch of articles to cover it, and you can go in there and check out all the links. They'll be in YouTube's video description. Senate wants the military to lock you up without trial. Another article for you. This is something that I covered in June of 2010. GGN National Guard Training for Food Riots, Mass Detentions, Part 3 of 3. Go in there and check that out. House Committee rushing to approve dangerous information sharing bill. Proposal would gut privacy laws and allow unprecedented data grab by government. Talking about the internet kill switch. And this would allow ISPs and other private entities to, quote, use cybersecurity systems to collect and share masses of user data with the government, other businesses, or any other entity, so long as it's for vaguely defined cybersecurity purposes, end quote. Moving on here, the Department of Homeland Security wants all the information it has on you accessible from one place. Now, we already know that if you're a Ron Paul supporter, if you're a gun owner, a returning veteran, there's a bunch of different descriptions. Just recently, if you have missing fingers, you could be a possible terrorist, and you are on the Department of Homeland Security's watch list. And they are being disseminated throughout various police agencies in different states. And I thought it was kind of interesting, just on a little quick side note, just to put it out there, and I'll keep moving, is the missing fingers that Rand Paul was talking about in that video. And I thought about it. Why would they be on that list? Well, this is what I thought of. Maybe I'm wrong. That's because they got tortured and detained already. That's why, because they're going to talk. They had their fingers cut off by the CIA, NSA, or whatever, some black torture site in Eastern Europe. And that's why they're considered terrorists, because they might talk. So it goes in there and talks about creating fusion centers after 9/11 so that local, state, and federal agencies could share intelligence, allowing the FBI, for example, to see if the local police have anything in their files on a particular individual, possible suspected terrorist. Now the Department of Homeland Security, UK has their own little Homeland Security as well, wants to create its own internal fusion center so that it may so that its many agencies can aggregate the data they have and make it searchable from a central location, which will be provided for Lucifer himself, I guess, the DHS. And that they're going to have what? They're going to have a terrorist button on YouTube as well. The DHS is calling it a federated information sharing system and asked its privacy advisory committee to weigh in on the repercussions at a public meeting in D.C. last month. Mayor Bloomberg, I have my own army, he said at a speech at MIT last night, and quote, I have my own army, which is the 7th biggest army in the world. I have my own State Department, much to Foggy Bottom's annoyance, and we have the United Nations in New York, and so we have an entry into the diplomatic world that Washington does not have. And it's funny because the UN does have their own little sovereign territory there in the United States, the global government that is, which is a private institution, and then with unelected people. And then talking about Washington. Washington isn't even really part of anything. It's the District of Columbia. It's its own separate entity. And this is what Americans just don't even pay attention to. But going back to this article again, I love this article, man. I'm going to keep going back to it because it's just tying into everything else, right? So Bloomberg has his army. Let's just call it the Megalopolis Army, right? Metropolitan or megapolitan areas compete globally. So he's competing globally. That's why he's saying that. So they have their own little army. In the Chicago's, the police, their own army in the Great Lakes region, and down here you have it, Georgia, which is just a big hub for the U.S. Army and their training for the IRS and all that. Big military down there. So they have their own little army there. Texas, they have their own National Guard. Could be their own country if they really wanted to be. Denver, and Atlanta could be the new capital east of the Mississippi when the shit hits the fan. Denver, the other capital, the new capital. So you have all kinds of stuff. Marines over here, their own little army. So you see where I'm getting at. So you can go in there and check this out. This is December or 7december.org. Wake up, human race. All of us. And this is of course what December 7th, 1911, 1941. Basically the anniversary of the biggest false flag government-sponsored terrorist attack that was allowed to happen and brought on basically not even a U.S. state. It was a territory, not even part of the United States. And it was attacked, and they let it happen, and it brought us into a huge war, which ended up with Hiroshima and all that testing. It says here, all of us are brothers and sisters. We have the power to finish all of the wars in the darkness. If we do not wake up, we will be too late, and the darkness will rise. So pretty crazy stuff. And it says here, 4 days, 13 hours, and a little countdown. So go check it up. I'll post the link. Tracking software makes stir phone privacy fears. Following up, AT&T, Sprint confirm use of Carrier IQ software on handsets. Verizon, AT&T and Sprint, Also, T-Mobile is using it as well. But it says here, several large carriers and handset makers, including Verizon and Nokia, have distanced themselves from the software. And the whole story began last week from an independent security researcher, Trevor Eckhart, published a report disclosing how the Carrier IQ software could be used by carriers and device makers to conduct surreptitious and highly intrusive tracking of Android and other smartphone users. Next up, Carrier IQ, your phone's secret recording device, says is a piece of software installed on millions of mobile phones, logs everything users do from what websites they browse to what text messages they say. Then under a new joint Canada-U.S. border security plan, both countries will be able to track the movement of cross-border travelers who crack down on citizenship fraud, illegal immigrants, and war criminals living in North America. Goes in or says a plan signed by Prime Minister Harper and U.S. sellout Barry Soetoro next week is raising privacy concerns over the amount of information that will be shared. Every time someone comes into Canada or leaves, they will be marked coming in or going out, so we will know exactly where they are. Goes in and talks about the passport, but your passport actually has an RFID chip in it. Doctor Who's world just a step away. DNA scanners like the sonic screwdriver could be available in 5 years. And it goes on or says handy devices like Doctor Who's sonic screwdriver or Spock's tricorder are within reach, scientists say, which means they probably already exist. 30 signs that the United States of America is being turned into a giant prison. I'd love to go through these, but I don't have time, guys. Links will be posted. UK Space Radar Project initiated. Then next up, Navy 2025 Forward Warfighter. And it basically talks about, Bahrain and how they have all these bases around the world and how they're going to utilize them in the future. But I just want to make this point real quick, and then I'll move on because I only have 2 minutes left, is that they're going to use all these sophisticated weapons against us if they want to, but then they leave us with these little guns that shoot bullets, and they're going to have all these high-tech weapons. I mean, think about it. In the 1500s, they had, basically guns. Now, 500 years later, we're still using that. They allow us to buy all these guns in the United States. Why? Because they're not scared of us. Because they have so many new weapons, cloaking devices, invisibility, and these drones, lasers. They don't need it. Killer drones in the hands of civilians, it says here, may soon fly with the FAA. That means what? Not only will the machines not be liable for killing people, but now it'll be in the hands of civilians and not the military. So drone warfare, President Obama and the French Revolution, check that out, how they've built 60 bases around the world for these things and that they're run by the Central Intelligence Agency. Finishing up, augmented reality enters the real world. We covered this about the contact lenses. And I just think this reality is just, it's a horrible nightmare. So I'm not going to switch to that, especially when my own computer and that won't even function right. It says here, young Americans aged 18 to 29 are less critical of government, more open to entitlement. That's because of all the indoctrination, re-education. U.S. sentences minors to life in prison. Texas keeping kids in school and out of court. Talking about a truancy task force. There they're arresting children now. The Republican Jewish coalition bars Ron Paul from presidential debate, saying he's too misguided and extreme. I've heard my uncle say that too. British politician resigns after anti-Semitic slur. Racial inequality officer resigns over anti-Semitic comments. Next up, we have Brooklyn swastikas found, another anti-Semitic crime under investigation. Which is interesting because these Nazi signs are actually the signs of the sun. Are part of Sumerian culture. Next up, teacher fired after anti-Semitic comments. Anti-Semitic billboard torn down.